Hi there, everyone. It's good to see everybody's faces. Hey there. Greetings.
Hello.
Oh, hi.
Hello, Portland.
We're here.
Good to see you, Martin.
And it's actually a hot day. We finally have summer in Portland. It's going to be 95 today, I think, which is our first day over.
Welcome to summer, right?
Yeah, it's good.
A few people are passing on their messages that they don't have a camera, but they say hi. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Right, well, I imagine there will be some more people who will be joining us over the next couple of minutes, but I did want to go ahead and officially welcome everyone. It's great to have you be able to join us, and we're really excited to gather, even though this year we are gathering virtually due to the pandemic. We're really sorry to be missing out on the opportunity to visit member gardens in Portland, Oregon. So I've included a few pics from the nationally accredited Rogerson Clematis collection and the Hoyt Arboretum, which is part of both the Acer and the Magnolia multi-site collections. So here's a rundown for today for the forum. We're going to have the chair and vice chair of our committee share a bit more about projects that we've been working on. There's a prioritization and safeguarding project. And then as we do each year, we're going to pause and take a couple minutes to celebrate our successes over the course of this past year. Then we have each of the coordinators of curatorial groups to provide brief updates. And then during the second half of the forum, we'll be focusing in on strategies to safeguard nationally accredited plant collections. We've lined up 3 case studies that will be provided by David Mishner, focused on historic peonies, Mike Kinchin, which he'll be talking about alpines, and Matt Lobdell, who will be covering the North America-China Plant Exploration Consortium, or NACPEC, as it is sometimes known as. And then we're hoping that that will give you some ideas about how they are safeguarding their collections, some different strategies, and then we'll open it up for an open forum discussion to then talk about ways that you're thinking about doing it or how you might approach it for your own collections. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Todd Ronzaville. He's the chair of the Plant Collections Network Committee. Go ahead, Todd.
Thanks, Pam. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. As Pam said, this is not quite the same as being in person for the forum, but I see that there's 46 people and counting. There's some great speakers today, and it's great to be able to get together virtually. So before we dig in too much, I just want to take a moment and introduce our PCN committee. And that includes Kevin Conrad, Michael Dosman, and Andrew Bunting, who are part of our full committee. And then Amy Highlands, Pam Allenstein, and myself, who are part of the executive committee. And this forum and so many things that the committee that happen through PCN are due to the committee's work, volunteering and providing their time and their guidance for whatever we can do to best serve all of you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy Hyland to talk about some of the projects that have come out in 2020 and explain how they may be useful to you or your staff.
Thanks, Todd. I hope everyone can hear me all right. It doesn't sound like my ploy of cartoons is going too well in the other room. So let me know if I can't come through well. This year, as with every other year, the committee was asked to take on a project, something to help advance the objectives of the Plant Collections Network. This year, we decided to focus on safeguarding our valuable holdings. This is something that aligns directly with the strategic plan of the APGA. And I had our, let me go with this. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so the strategic plan outlaid several goals, but the one we chose to focus on was the leadership and resilience goal. Its objective, building resilience and galvanizing gardens to proactively build and sustain resilience while navigating change, seemed very timely to us, even though we chose to focus on this goal back in November. As we moved along in this process, it became more and more timely, truth be told. We decided to focus on safeguarding valuable holdings through planned replications and distributions. So as we thought about this plan for the network, we tried to focus on the two things that we thought people would need most: help in communicating what is necessary within our organizations, and then also some kind of tool to help us get started when prioritizing collections within our own organizations and within our own missions. So two products came out of this project. The first one is that communications tool. It is simply a document that talks about collections prioritization in the form of core collections development. Pam, do we have a shot of that?
We've got two pictures. Here's the library entry, but don't have a picture of the actual core collection primer document, but do have one for the prioritization worksheet.
So this is where you can find both of those documents then. If you go to American Public Gardens Association's website, you can find them through the forum. So the first one being a collections communications tool. The second one is actually a sort of a decision matrix, right? It's a way to help your organization think through the various prioritizations that you have, how to put your mission in alignment with the standards of excellence that the committee has come up with. I don't know if any of you have done these prioritizations before at your organizations, but they can often be very complex, very complicated things to get your hands around. And I think that Todd, who was the primary author on this document, did a really fabulous job of bringing it down into those core nuggets of truth that you have to find within your organization to help you move forward. Oftentimes, I feel like the curatorial community either lives in the past as, you know, the de facto historians of our organizations, or a bit too far in the future as we're telling our organizations what kinds of things we need to build to be able to best accomplish our missions. And these two documents, I think, are really going to be a great place for you all to springboard these conversations within your organization, focusing on the very immediate now, and also able to help us think through how we go about determining what is important, what we need to safeguard, and what we do first. I think that's everything that I have to tell you about our two projects. Todd, Pam, did I miss anything?
I think it sounded great.
Then
Thank you so much.
I'm going to pass it off.
All right. Well, thank you. It's been fantastic to work with committee members. They have given so much of their time and their expertise to really guide this program, and I can't thank you all enough. It's been fantastic, and looking forward to continuing to work together. So let's take a few minutes to celebrate our successes of this year, which seems particularly important for us to do this year. As of today, we have 147 nationally accredited plant collections, and they are being held by 81 participating institutions. This year marks our 25th year partnering with the USDA Agricultural Research Service and the National Arboretum. And I did a tally of what this means over the life of the program. We've conducted 143 site reviews. Some of those have even been doubled up on several collections. And I just wanted to say a big shout out and thank you for all our peer site reviewers. This program is distinguished by its peer review process, and we couldn't do it without you. And congrats to Greenwood in Brooklyn on becoming the newest site for our Quercus multi-site collection. And we welcome Greenwood to the Plant Collections Network. Congrats also to the Boyce Thompson Arboretum in Arizona. They achieved full status for their eucalyptus collection. And you'll be reading more about that collection in an upcoming issue of the Public Garden magazine. So, as I mentioned, we're celebrating 25 years in partnering with the USDA, with the ARS and the National Arboretum. A number of you might work with curators in the USDA's National Plant Germplasm System to safeguard collections. And just wanted to show off again this plaque of recognition that we gave the Arboretum last year at the conference event that they hosted. We are so deeply grateful for the Arboretum and the USDA for your continuing support of the Plant Collections Network. We are also working together on building new collections. Kevin, Conrad, and I have been targeting the native sassafras, which is threatened by laurel wilt, a disease that's severely impacting all Lauraceae. We've leveraged the network to collect leaf samples from throughout sassafras' extensive natural range. And researchers at the National Arboretum have been sequencing these to determine the genetic diversity throughout its range and target conservation efforts. Also, researchers at the USDA lab in Fort Collins have been testing long-term seed storage and cryopreservation protocols. So thank you to all of you who contributed to these efforts to date. Our association's tree gene conservation partnership with the U.S. Forest Service also continues. A number of PCN members have participated in collecting projects or taken distributed propagules for safeguarding in your collections. And those of you who are interested in becoming involved can find more information on our website. We continue our Turn It Up communications campaign to highlight your collections. And we've updated our website, collections showcase web pages, and we'll continue to do so as you send us updates. We've also featured different nationally accredited plant collections in each issue of our Public Garden magazine. So a big shout out of thanks to this year's authors, Morgan Beatles, Matt Lobdell, Lynn Namath, and Ben Storms, and Tony Aiello. And we've highlighted nationally accredited plant collections in our social media through our Friday Flora series. And then came March and the COVID-19 pandemic. It's brought far-reaching impacts on our gardens and really on each of you. Collections care has become increasingly challenging amid economic hardships and the public health restrictions on operations. Most of you reported that your organizations were prioritizing care of your nationally accredited plant collections. We know that these are very difficult times, and we just want to take this opportunity to applaud each and every one of you for carrying on this truly essential work. So looking at what's on the horizon, we'll be offering another funding round this fall for projects through our Tree Gene Conservation Partnership. We're adapting our procedures to prioritize the safety of our peer reviewers and applicants while still moving the process of applying and getting reviewed to become part of the plant collections network to move that process forward. And we're working throughout this year to develop online training for disaster planning, which will incorporate living collections and biological invasions. So stay tuned. Now, we've asked the curatorial group coordinators for each of our 4 accredited multi-site collections to provide a brief 2-minute update. First up is Ben Storms and Tony Aiello, the coordinators of our nationally accredited ACER multi-site collection.
Great. Thanks, Pam. I hope the audio is coming through clear here. I am sharing a 2-minute window with Tony, so I'm going to keep it real quick. The ACER group, as Pam mentioned, had the opportunity to be featured in Public Garden magazine back in the November 2019 issue in a 3-page spread that highlighted some of the collections work that has happened over the last few years. So I'd encourage you to check that out. It has some details on some project work from previous years that was carried out. We're coming up on our multi-site inventory collection. So this is collaborative inventory across all holdings, and it's quite an undertaking. We've been using a standardized template that was developed a couple of years ago that's been very successful. And so one of the things that I'd like to do this year is we have now 3 years of standard information and looking at not just gaining an inventory that's static, but looking at how some of the particularly vulnerable plants have maybe gone up or down in collections, as one of the group's targets is to distribute and share and see if that's happening. And I'll hand it over to Tony to talk about some of the work with BGCI that's happening.
Okay, just briefly, BGCI has created a global consortium for the conservation of maples, similar to some of the other consortia that they've put together. Some of you may be aware of those. So that's something that's kind of in the works. Again, hampered by lack of travel the last few months and for the foreseeable future. So I'm not sure where that's going to be, but hopefully that'll be coming together in the next year or so. And along those lines, BGCI is working with the Maple Society to come up with a standardized list of maple names, similar to what the Oak Society has done. And so this is something that we took input from members and people from around the world. And Dan Crowley, who's now at BGCI, is working on coming up with a standardized list. So that may help us, or hopefully will help us with trying to get these inventories together and figure out what we all have in our collections. So that's it. Is that 2 minutes, Pam?
That's awesome. You did fantastic. All right. So next up is Holly Forbes, who's the coordinator for the nationally accredited CyCAD multi-site collection. Holly?
Hi, everybody. CyCADs are slow growing, and so our activities are consequentially slow growing too. But we have a modified template for data sharing, which we'll be activating in the coming months when we're all still somewhat sequestered at home or in our offices. Because the CyCAD site data is so sensitive, we are not collecting the same level of detail, but we are going to be adding the sex of our dioecious plants so that we can help coordinate any sort of stud bank activity. And at the moment, I'm waiting for a shipment of pollen from South Africa for one of the Encephalartos rarities, Encephalartos heenanii, and we'll be sharing that with our multi-site collection at Ganawalska Lotus Land. So that's exciting. And most of us have freezers of pollen, and we'll be working on sharing that to create more propagules. But we'll also be scheduling one of our multi-site coordination Zoom meetings soon, and further check in with all the collection holders. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Holly. And next we'll hear from Greg Page, who's the coordinator of the nationally accredited Magnolia multi-site collection. Greg?
Thanks, Pam. Hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Didn't hear from a lot of folks when I sent out requests for info, and rightfully so with everything that's going on. But a quick thank you to Holly, Matt, Chris Carley at the National Arboretum, and they're working on their collection, Martin, and I hope I'm not forgetting anybody, but not a lot of new stuff to report, obviously. Some of the collection trips that we were working on also have kind of been stalled. Matt Lobdell and Andrew and I did some scouting almost 2 years ago with plans to go back and get seed, and all that's kind of been put on a back burner. Also working with Conrad and some of those ventures. Also need to give a quick thank you to Matt. We've kind of swapped groups and are integral in both the Oaks and the Magnolias. But to be fair and honest, Matt is still doing quite a bit of the hard work with keeping up with the collection database. We are looking for somebody to take those responsibilities over, and have some ideas on some new people to solicit in my part of the planet as potential group members. And that's about the bulk of everything that we have going on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Greg. And last but not least, Matt Lobdell, who's the coordinator of the nationally accredited Quercus multi-site collection. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. I think the advantage of going forth in this sort of update is, I can just say, and also Oaks, because we're doing a lot of the same stuff. But yeah, we had a report in the one of the recent Public Garden magazines about how the collection has actually grown over the last 10 years or so. And it was a fun piece to write because in many ways it served as a follow-up to an article Dennis Collins wrote in about 2006 as the group was just forming. And then you look, 15 years later about how much we've done in that period of time, whether it's really recruiting a lot more members and actually really starting to do some conservation projects that we weren't before. So it's I won't say it's a fun read. I liked reading it, but it's a pretty short read. If you haven't checked it out yet, I encourage you to do so. As far as other things we're working on, Tony and Ben talked a little about the GCCO for maples through BGCI. So we've also started one through Oaks. So we had a virtual kickoff meeting hosted by the Morton Arboretum. I don't know, weeks, months, something like that ago. All the days kind of blend together for me. But Pam was there. A few other people attended the meeting. I gave a quick overview of what we're working on and plant collections network through the Oak collection and how that might impact and assist with some of their goals. So that's about all I'll say right now. Again, not a whole lot to report due to the nature of things, but yeah, certainly check out the article and looking forward to hearing more about the GCCO.
Well, thanks so much, Matt. And thank you to all of the coordinators of these multi-site collections. It is something to be doing on top of your day jobs, and I do not underestimate the effort that the day jobs are taking these days. So even getting to the point of thinking about these multi-sites and furthering group goals, it's something that we hope can continue. And even if it's just focusing in on one thing at a time, or a subset of the group who can proceed forward. But we're very excited about thinking about the multi-site collection model in part of how other gardens with other types of collections might be thinking about safeguarding and backing up their collections, perhaps with a complementary site or a newer garden who maybe doesn't have well-developed collections yet, who might be interested in serving as a backup location. So with that, I'd like to turn our focus over to safeguarding strategies for our nationally accredited plant collections. We've asked 3 individuals to provide some case studies on how they're approaching safeguarding. So please share your thoughts through chat, even during these presentations, if they come to mind, so you don't lose your train of thought. And then we'll also take a few minutes at the end for an open forum discussion. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn this over to David Mishner with Historic Peonies.
Can everyone see and hear at this point? And you can use chat to respond to that. I'm going to assume that we're good, and I'm going to launch. It's really good to have these presentations to be able to think about how we are moving forward. If someone had told me 10 years ago this is where we would be with the PCN, I would have told them they were crazy. And I have a lot to thank to my colleague, Dr. Nastasha Vlasova from the Central Botanic Gardens of the National Academy of Sciences of Belarus. The image here is of our peony garden at the University of Michigan.
David, excuse me for interrupting. We currently are seeing your presenter view.
Got it. Just a second.
You could swap those out. That'd be great.
It may only let me do it this way.
So at the top of your screen, did you see display settings and then it just swaps between screens?
I was in what I thought was the presenter for mine it's the bottom. I thought I was in slideshow. So what are you seeing when you see this? Are you seeing overview, or are you seeing 2 slides with the next slide?
We're currently seeing, it hasn't kicked in for your presentation mode, presenting the slideshow.
We're seeing the overview screen right now.
Overview, good. Okay, that's the one you should. So Pam, are you with me?
You'll need to launch the slideshow.
I have.
Oh, you have to do it again. It went back out.
Just a second. We're gonna end slideshow and we're gonna start it again. Don't know what the delay is, but we'll get this going. Are we good again with overview?
There you go. There you go. Swap presenter view and slideshow.
Just a second. Are we good?
Yay, thank you.
Hooray.
Thank you. Weird screens here, way too many of them going. So anyhow, so we'll just keep flying. There are 3 things I want to talk about. What diversity are we conserving? How does a resilience network help us manage this? And the roles of MOUs and partners. I just want to emphasize that peonies have been domesticated for more than 2 millennia in Asia and in Europe. Asia longer than here, up to 4 millennia. You'd asked for a success story. One is Sylvia Saunders, seen here. We had it as an unknown in verifying our collection with teams of experts over 4 years who site verified our entire nearly 700 plant collection. There was no question this was Sylvia Saunders, which has been missing for decades from Winterthur. So it is now back at Winterthur in the garden designed by Professor Sanders and his daughter Sylvia. So what are we conserving? In historic cultivars, we're conserving clones. And this has given us some real pause about how do you assess diversity in clones, because historically you think about it through names, breeders, and all the like. But what it comes down to is some breeders were very prolific. We have over 50 breeders in our collection alone. But if they were working with a very narrow breeding stock, it doesn't really matter much. Also, different peonies have different contexts in human culture. They're highly gendered and social contexts, and that's part of what we're trying to conserve. So we've been working with our colleagues at the Central Botanic Garden in Minsk in Belarus, just a short profile of the two there. And there are three kinds of risks we see. I'm going to focus on blue for this talk, but I have to start with the ones in red. In working on building an endowment request, which is $2 million, we had to assess, have other peony gardens gone extinct? And the answer is at least 5 to 7 in major institutions in the US and Canada. And it is all a lack of endowment and lack of social capital. That's why I've been churning out the books. So about the key parts in the blue now, we have in our collection and in Minsk, I believe we're now up to 100% of the plants have been matched to original descriptions, and they have outside experts come in and look at them. What we're looking at is doing genomic profiles. So if I have Queen of Sheba and you're Queen of Sheba, we should have multiple matches. We'd really like to go to whole genome, but we're not there yet. I've gotten myself on the board of the American Peony Society, which is the international cultivar registry authority for Paeonia, and I work with the registrar. This requires building an enormous database, far larger than the sample you see here from basically 2014 to 16 of a Belarusian graduate student. We are now hundreds of markers more and several hundred cultivars. What we're trying to find is where is the genomic diversity, how to assess it, maximize it across the collections. We have several major publications. To take it back to PCN though, here, this is a little bit hard to put your mind around at first, but we sampled 10 gardens, most of which are not in PCN in the US and Canada, and we asked to share the inventories. And there's 1,700 peony cultivars. Crinkled white is in 9 of them, if you look at the 9 and the dot. It's wildly redundant. But if you look at the 1 column, nearly 940 peony cultivars are only 1 garden plants away from extinction. They're not known elsewhere unless they show up in Europe. If we look at the raw data, this is now several years old. What I was interested in trying to figure out is if we build a very large resilience network, where is the diversity hiding as opposed to the diversity within each garden? And it turns out that the 4 largest collections in North America have over half the diversity, and it's in part just because of the size. If we flip it and look at Brooklyn Botanic Garden for column 4 rows from the bottom, you'll see that over half of its plants are unique. They're tree peonies, but because the collection is so small and focused, that's an important element, but it's a very small percentage of the historic peonies we're trying to collect. In order to move anything across borders and to share, we want to be certain that they're virus-free, but peonies are historically known for being intractable in trade for tissue culture. The intersectional peonies are different, but herbaceous peonies are hideously difficult. Colleagues at Belarus are working on that quite actively. And our goal is to be able to regenerate virus-free all peony cultivars of historic prioritization. To do this has required a number of MOUs. We are in our second 5-year MOU with the Belarusian Academy of Sciences, and these are currently covering educational expenses, research and conferences, and some publication expenses. Databasing comes up. We're not trying to synchronize them yet, but what you see in the bottom here is that we are very actively working with the School of Information Museum's data faculty on how to even be tracking the published peony viruses as we find them. In order for us to track, it has to be published in GeneBank, which is where sequence codings are published. I want to emphasize, I think all of your collections are equally with viruses. A lot of them are silent. They don't show up till you have excess genome left over. Just a sample of some of the publications that we've been coming out with and presentations. And by working on building the $2 million endowment, we're building the cash infrastructure to work with grants and agencies between. And I'll end on this with, we're in a major research university which has no plant science, period. And it only has had botany and landscape architecture. So we've had to make hay with the fields we have. And so it turns out that if you want to do genomic work, your medical school and your pre-med departments and your statistics are where you find the partners. And we're building a huge community of faculty and students who just absolutely love working with peonies. So our model is coming up with, how do we come up with disease-free materials, and then how do we maximize sharing the plants that are the rarest? Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, David. That was really interesting just to hear how you're approaching it for historic peonies and sharing between working with collaboratively with the garden in Minsk, as well as interdepartmentally, as you said, opportunistically, to be able to advance the goals and to safeguard this collection. So next we're going to hear from Mike Kinchin. He is at the Denver Botanic Gardens. Mike, if you could tell us about your safeguarding strategies for alpines.
Sure, great. Can you guys hear me okay? So our collection is unique like all the collections. Dealing with a large herbaceous collection, we have some challenges that I'll talk about. Here at Denver Botanic Gardens, we actually hold the Alpines of the World collection. So we have alpines from all over the globe. Betty Ford Alpine Gardens in Vail has the Alpines of Colorado, which you'll see how that kind of sits in. What's kind of unique about the gardens here in Colorado is we have a bunch of different sites at different elevations. So here you'll see the 3 Denver Botanic Garden sites with the Pentagon there. The 2 green ones near Denver, our main site, which I'm broadcasting from today, and then also our Chatfield site. Those are both around a mile high, 5,300 feet. But we also have a site at Mount Goliath, 11,500 feet. However, at that site, we can only use native germplasm from that particular site. So over the last couple of years, we've been working with a bunch of other public gardens here in Colorado, and actually now one in Wyoming, to back up our collection. So you'll see the different polygons there show the elevation of those gardens. They range anywhere from about 5,000 feet up to 8,500 feet. And clearly those higher gardens are better for backing up the alpine collection. So that's Betty Ford. Here's our role with alpine plants and environments. We're here to educate people. We do quite a bit through both our research department and our horticulture department. We also do a fair amount of research, both horticulturally and also for conservation. We display one of the largest collections of alpine plants in North America. We're also here to conserve, both in horticulture and also in the wild. So over the last couple of years, as I've mentioned, we've been collaborating with other regional gardens and actually gardens worldwide. As I mentioned, we're the holder of the Alpines of the World collection. At this point in time, we're the only garden with that official collection. Unofficially, through some of the other gardens in the region, we've partnered. Currently, we have about 450 to 500 species of true alpine plants in our living collections here at Denver Botanic Gardens. And that includes both our collections here at York Street and at Mount Goliath, which is just a native collection. We've done a lot of work with the U.S. Forest Service, and this kind of gives us maybe a unique position amongst North American public gardens. This partnership actually goes back to 1945 and actually predates the formation of Denver Botanic Gardens. Our garden in Mount Goliath, as I mentioned, is at 11,500 feet, so it's actually the highest public garden in North America. We're in a relationship with the National Forest where we take care of the gardens surrounding the Dos Chappelle Visitor Center, which you see there. And we supply not only the care of the garden, but we also do interpretation and we supply guides through our docents. to help educate the public on alpine environments and the collections there. This site's a bit unique because we can only use native germplasm actually collected from the mountain itself. So we do a lot of seed collecting there through the fall, and then we bring it back down here to York Street, propagate it, and take it back up the following year. We've also been working with our MOU to display some of this at our York Street site. We've done a fair amount of collaboration with our work with alpines. We participate in the Index Seminum program. This is international and has allowed us to access a tremendous amount of material. Since 2013, we've had a regional annual meeting of alpine and rock garden collections here in Colorado. So these are the gardens that we're partnering with currently: Betty Ford Alpine Gardens in Vail, Colorado, the gardens on Spring Creek in Fort Collins, Yampa River Botanic Park in Steamboat Springs, the Horticultural and Art Society Garden of Colorado Springs, Durango Botanic Gardens, and Montrose Botanic Gardens. And starting this fall, we'll partner with Cheyenne Botanic Gardens in Cheyenne, Wyoming. The native collections are shared with Betty Ford Gardens, Gardens of Spring Creek, and the Yampa River Botanic Park. The Alpines of the World collection is shared with Yampa River, Betty Ford, and Gardens on Spring Creek in order of the name. So we do a fair amount of work with Yampa River. They've actually been our best collaborator for sharing material with, and Betty Ford is also up there. Extras of the Native and Alpines of the World collection, as they're available, are sent to Montrose, Durango, and the Horticulture and Arts Society in Colorado Springs. We've also sent some additional collections to Gothenburg Botanic Garden in Sweden. And until 2019, there was a great nursery in Fort Collins, LaPorte Avenue Nursery, so all the non-wild collections were backed up there. Unfortunately, that nursery's gone out of business, so that's going to create a bit of a challenge for us at this point. Some of the plants that were returned from LaPorte were Dianthus subicalis and Androstaceae sempervivoides. We had lost those at one point, and because Karen always propagated those, I could get them back pretty easily. So far, though, however, between the actual gardens, we have not had to ask for anything back yet. The collections themselves are tracked in BG base, and also we do a consent to obtain plant material. A little bit more with our collaboration with the U.S. Forest Service. So Mount Goliath, as I mentioned, the land is owned by the U.S. Forest Service. We provide the interpretation and garden care. We do a tremendous amount of seed collection trips here in the Western U.S. with permitting through the U.S. Forest Service. We've also done a tremendous amount of herbarium work in Colorado and Wyoming, documenting our alpine flora. And this kind of leads into the last part of the presentation, where we have the North American Botanic Garden Strategy for Alpine Plant Conservation. Here's some of the seed collecting trips that we've done over the last couple of years. In 2018, we did a joint collection trip with Yampa River Botanic Park, Gardens on Spring Creek, and Denver Botanic Gardens. So we actually had staff from all three gardens on the trip. The collections were also sent to Betty Ford Alpine Gardens for backing up. Gardens on Spring Creek and Denver Botanic Gardens germinated the seed, and it was supported by Shoshone and Bighorn National Forests in Wyoming. With the germination between the two gardens, it worked out that Gardens on Spring Creek had some luck with species that we didn't have any luck with here at Denver Botanic Gardens. This fulfills some of the objectives and targets of the North American Botanic Garden Strategy for Alpine Plant Conservation. Also, we do some herbarium and seed collections here in Colorado, both in documented and undocumented areas. It's still a bit surprising that we still don't fully know what's all out there in Colorado and especially Wyoming. So this has been going into our Alpines of Colorado living collections. And the seed is shared again with Betty Ford Alpine Gardens, Gardens on Spring Creek, Yampa River, Botanic Park. And this also fulfills some of the objectives for the North American Alpine Plant Conservation Strategy. And then lastly, with Betty Ford Alpine Gardens, we have been working on drafting the North American Botanic Garden Strategy for Alpine Plant Conservation. The first draft was completed by Betty Ford Alpine Gardens and the U.S. Forest Service about 10 years ago. And then 2 years ago, Betty Ford Alpine Gardens approached us here at Denver Botanic Gardens to basically refine and create a second draft. This is currently in the review process and should hopefully be published here by the end of the year. This sets guidelines for North American botanic gardens to safeguard North American alpines. And both the Alpines of Colorado and the Alpines of the World collection fulfill this.
Well, thank you so much, Mike. That is a very fascinating example of a different approach that could be taken that's customized in particular for alpines, where the altitude is a factor in safeguarding, which is especially going to play a role in the coming years with the impacts of climate change on Sky Islands and all, and then the Forest Service collaboration, as well as the nursery that you had been collaborating with, gives another aspect of who might be the partners who you could work with, as well as additional gardens in collaborating to back up your valuable holdings and make that major contribution to conservation efforts.
Great,
So,
thanks.
Thank you, Mike. All right, so next up is Matt Labdell. Matt's going to share some of the impacts that NACPEC collaboration has had, consortium has had over the decades in intersecting with nationally accredited plant collections, and some information about its model in data sharing and plant distribution that may be able to be adapted for use with your gardens and how you can safeguard your own collections. So go ahead, Nat.
Perfect, thank you, Pam. I assume everybody can hear me and can see the presentation here?
Looks good.
Okay, perfect, thanks. So as Pam said, I'm gonna give a brief presentation on NACPEC, or the North America China Plant Exploration Collaborative, or Consortium, sorry, the wrong C. I'm really going to try to focus in on particularly how we've shared data in the group over the past few years, as well as some overall plans for plant distribution from within the group. Okay, so NACPEC, from the way it was explained to me, was formed in the early 1990s to help encourage collaboration between various North American public gardens with similar goals in China. So what was happening back at this period is there really wasn't a lot of plant exploration that was happening there, at least from Westerners. The country had been largely closed off since the Cultural Revolution. There was a fairly significant collecting expedition in about 1980, the Sino-American Botanical Expedition. But as the 90s rolled around, I mean, Morton Arboretum was starting to have some interest, as was the USDA, Arnold, Morris, and everybody just sort of got together and figured, you know, instead of all trying to seek out these collaborators individually and kind of forming these all separately, this would maybe be a little bit easier if we just kind of banded together and did this in a collaborative fashion. And the group has been fairly successful. I mean, it's existed for nearly 30 years now, particularly for the last 20 or so. Beijing Botanical Garden has been the primary partner in China in terms of coordinating access permissions to the country. The goals of exploration have been rather broad, and they've included just broadening the genetic pool of known species, really to try to get hardier forms of some species, as well as trying to get individuals that will do better in particularly microclimates. There's been some work with insect and disease resistance, some rare species conservation, horticultural forms, and new species in general. So the group itself has about 11 members at this point now. So it was originally formed with a core of 6 or 7. Dawes and University of British Columbia entered a little bit later into the group. And not pictured on this map, but the newest member is actually Beijing Botanical Gardens. So they joined the group in an official capacity last year. And just a quick note, I want to thank Tony Aiello for letting me use some of his graphics here, including this nice map of collaborators. Okay, so there have been 17 to 18 NACPEC expeditions over the years. And as you look at this map here, you can see they're mainly focusing in on the Qingling Mountains, so really northern or central China, to really get some hardy trees and plant material for most groups. And the focus has really predominantly been on woody plant species. There have been a few herbaceous collections, but that really hasn't been the primary focus of the group. And as you look at a few maybe anomalous readings, like you see number 7 down in south parts of China, that was due to a specific trip looking for Tsuga chinensis in 1998. And there was also another single species trip for Acer grisling at one point. Another interesting thing is last year we actually had a little bit of a reverse expedition in which Chinese participants actually came to North America to do some plant collection here, really collecting up and down the Appalachia region. So how does seed sharing and data sharing work? We have a photo of Peter Zale here in the middle of a room surrounded by about 120 collections or so that were being cleaned and sorted and ready for export. And the way we've typically done this on NACPEC expeditions is about 2 or 3 individuals will generally participate on the trip. And then we'll split the seed at that point in China, kind of send it to separate institutions. And then whatever is sort of left over at the end will be offered to other members in the group. So there is at least a little bit of duplication of material at that stage. However, where we can really start to get into more detail about this is when we start looking at some data sharing. So here we have, I just took a quick screen cap of a survey, which each NACPEC member will fill out on an annual basis. And what they're asked to do is for all of the NACPEC collections to indicate the number of them they have planted out, then the number of them which are in production areas. So you can see here, it's obviously a fairly long list. I just took a quick cropped area of it, but here we have this 1996 expedition. You can see it's all organized by collection number. The herbarium specimens where appropriate are there. Usually these are received as seed. You can just see the number for each particular organization here. So that helps us keep an eye on what everybody has and if the quantities are starting to get low in any particular session. And this is actually pretty similar to what we see in some of the various curatorial groups, like the oaks, the maples, the magnolias, where we kind of keep an eye on what everybody has. So if something starts to get a little bit low, we can start looking at some reprops at that point. And of course, due to the nature of the way seed collecting works, you rarely ever end up with as much of everything as you want. So there are some collections which unfortunately do kind of fall out of cultivation as time goes on. But this has actually been very helpful for us in terms of, again, keeping an eye on what's actually entered the group. And it's also been helpful to eliminate duplication of efforts. I was on one NACPEC expedition about 2 years ago in Hubei, and we actually had a printout of this because it was helpful for us to, you know, when you're in the field, you want to collect anything, right? If you see seed that happens to be available. But in a few times, we maybe said, well, we've already collected Acer davidii subspecies grosserii about 13 times from this area of the country, so maybe we don't really need to make another collection here. So it's been helpful in that regard. I know we're running low on time, so I'm going to just wrap up with a few concluding statements. So NACPEC is an example of a long-established plant exploration consortium, which has really benefited from some strategic planning and a clear focus. So one thing that was actually quite helpful for NACPEC is that first year, really before any collecting was done, there was a diplomatic trip into China, which really helped gain an understanding for which collaborators are going to be the most helpful to work with and that sort of thing. And as far as seed sharing, they're shared at time of collection when it's available. We do a survey for the group once a year. Another thing that NACPEC's been working with recently is really supporting a lot of knowledge and benefit sharing between North America and China. There's been some staff exchanges and that sort of thing, which is always important. And expeditions for 2020 are all put on hold for obvious reasons, though we are very optimistic for the future. So thanks everyone for your attention, and thanks to all the various presenters. And yeah, certainly let me know if you have any NACPEC questions in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was another fantastic example of a long-standing collaboration that has really provided the structure for coordination between those organizations that have been participating. both in this country as well as in China. So we've heard a number of different examples so far, and it's been everything from the multi-site collections that we have that are part of the Plant Collections Network program. We've heard about domestic and North American and international garden collaborations that have happened, as well as different partnerships with state and federal agencies and other nonprofit organizations, as well as nurseries and the possibility of collaborating with them. We thought at this point we'd like to turn it open to all of you and open up the forum for discussion. How are you safeguarding your collection? And you can either go ahead and use the chat box to type comments in there, or this is the bit where I'm going to try to figure out how to do this part. Monitoring the raised hand features. If anybody else is really up on this and is taking a look at that and monitoring it, feel free to turn on your mics and call on folks.
So maybe we should bring up the Alpine question that's in the comments, Pam?
That would be brilliant. Go ahead.
So there's a question about how you're sure that you're getting back the same germplasm that you shared with an organization. Does it come down to trust, or are you often putting together agreements as to how you'll track that germplasm to make sure it's the same, and then how you'll get it back?
So at this point, Laporte gave really good records, but since they're out of business, going forward with the other public gardens, it comes down to their database and record keeping if we're actually getting back the same material. So we'll see how that goes going forward.
Can anybody cite an example of a successful retrieval that they've encountered something that was lost in your collection, and you were able to have a collaborator resupply that accession so that it could be restored in your collection?
Not out of my current collection, but it certainly happened at Longwood before. They had several clivias, I want to say, that were able to be brought back from Europe as a result of some of their former collaboration.
That's great. That's great.
And I don't
Any
see
other?
So I can't ask for more information.
So this is David Mitchner. Part of a resilience network for us is that we're also working with historical societies, just because the number of cultivars is so great. And so although they're not part of PCN, and this is part of why we're working on genomic profiles, because we don't trust their records, we are putting them into historic sites, both state and federal. And we're building that, and so far we've had to rebuild it several times, but we haven't shared back, but that's our intent.
Holly?
Well, I was going to say that when Michael Dossman and Peter Del Tredici dredged up all the Sino-American Botanical Expedition records from the 1980s and contacted the institutions that received distributions, we were able to resupply the Arnold Arboretum with a few of those collections, which we were holding uniquely. So we were very happy to be able to propagate those and send them back so that they are duplicated and won't be lost. But that had been well over, what, 15 years, Michael? So I think we kept all those original collection numbers assigned to the material, so it was easy to track.
Yeah, thanks, Holly, for highlighting that. Yeah, we did it 20 years after the initial trip. And it all goes down to, keeping track of the original collection number. Even after the fact, you can reassign your own accession numbers, but we could, you could reattribute all of the collections data, even for, some people knew that they picked up things at the then AABGA fire sale of plants when, the Carrier Arboretum got rid of its quarter share. And we were able to reconnect people who picked things up then with things. So, one thing that in many of the different examples, whether it's the different collaborative multi-institutional sites or for some of the collections, or what Matt was talking about with NACPEC, again, just keeping track of that one sole collection number is great. And then on some kind of an annual or every 5 years even, or whatever the case might be, do a new inventory or survey to see what might have been common 5 years ago. All of a sudden now you've got the last unicorn. One thing, and I don't know, Amy, if this relates a little bit to the question also, but I'll put the plug in here just because of the U.S. National Arboretum's wonderful collaboration and support of the Plant Collections Network. If you've got the opportunity to acquire a lot of germplasm in seed form, and assuming it's relatively orthodox, collecting that material and sharing it with NPGS so it can, put that into one of the many different germplasm repositories, that's a wonderful way to make sure that it's being stored and stewarded by experts, the world's experts in seed conservation, and then also you can make withdrawals. And we've done that before, even trips. 1994 trip, a NACPEC trip that Peter Del Tredici was on, we ended up getting seed just a couple of years ago from one of those collections that we had lost. And so rather than getting cuttings from the Morris or somebody else, we just went right back to the original source of the seed, and you're going to get a little extra different genetics with that. So I'll just put the plug in there that if you've got the opportunity to collect extra seed, I know it takes a little extra time to clean or maybe go through customs or whatever the case might be, but if you're really trying to do some preservation, particularly with species of conservation status, collect several thousand seed, more than what you need, and see about sharing it with them.
Thanks, Michael. Those are excellent points to bring up. And for those of us who are thinking about strategies, or hoping that this can inspire you, that you consider this a call for action, a call to action, to really think about how you are backing up your collections. Think about what is irreplaceable in your collections, and what you really can't afford to lose, and what kind of safety net you've set up, and what you could do to move towards shoring that up, and thinking about that as part of your overall proactive disaster planning steps. So unfortunately, we are out of time. I would love to just keep this going, but I know aware of your other responsibilities as well. First of all, I just wanted to thank all of the presenters today, and committee members, as well as coordinators of all the multi-site collections. Very much appreciate your contributions to today's forum. Thank you all for joining in this virtual forum, and thank you for all the work that you're doing in safeguarding these incredibly valuable nationally accredited plant collections. Take care, everyone. Bye.